concerns we have about those. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Mr Chairman.
Mark Mitchell.
Mr Chair, I move that the question be now put.
I want to hear the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Chairman, I want to come back to the concern that I have that the Minister is not looking to get a stronger base of support for what is a very important piece of legislation. In the earlier piece of legislation, we managed to get support across the board in the House. The Minister has said an argument that, first of all, he doesn't want to interfere with Fonterra, but the very fact of this legislation under which Fonterra exists indicates there is an interest by this Parliament and by this country in what the future of that industry would be. We don't want to see demutualisation. We don't want to see the investor fund get so large that foreign interests will ensure a greater degree of influence over the way in which the company goes and send money out of this country. But I see no provision in this legislation that provides adequate safeguards against that. I'd like the Minister to clarify what his understanding of Fonterra's position is on the cap of 23%, because, Minister, first of all you said that Fonterra was opposed to it, and then you said that they would accept it. My understanding, from looking at the email traffic, is that they are comfortable with that that is a safeguard, and that's what we're asking you to consider. It hopefully wouldn't get anywhere near that cap, but having the cap is at least a safeguard in terms of limiting the amount of dividends that would flow from our most successful enterprises out of this country. I received from the Parliamentary Library just on Friday their concern about the trend in the current account deficit. It's now $2.8 billion for the March 2012 quarter. That's the biggest level of the current account deficit in over a year. It's increased by $624 million. We know from the Treasury projections that our current account deficit is going to get worse year after year after year. So my question to the Minister is, how will having an uncapped level of dividends come out of this country, because there is no cap on the level of people who can invest in the bonds, help our current account deficit? How does that help grow New Zealand? How does that help us control and own our own future? We are putting in good faith to you, Minister, a proposal that would provide some assurance. And it's not just this side of the House, and I think all three parties on this side of the House have expressed concern, but as the Minister will know, it's also many of the farmers. I get all the farmer magazines. I live in a rural area, and week after week I've seen that debate raging in the farming community. It's not good enough to say that 66% of farmers have voted in favour. Sir Henry van der Heyden, expressed his disappointment that that figure wasn't what he wanted it to be. We know that it's 66% of milk, fat, solids. It's not 66% of individual farmers. So the level of farmer opposition to this legislation could be considerably higher. Whatever it is, and it is at least a third, it may be as high as a half, that concern is expressed passionately, and farmers in this country and the people of this country want to know that we've got some assurance over the future ownership, control and flow of dividends from this company. And I want to know whether this bill and the failure of the government to accept the cap is because this is the top of a slippery slope. I want the Minister to explain what John Key meant when he said to the CEO, the former CEO of the New Zealand Stock Exchange, it would be great to have Fonterra as a listed company. That set out in the New Zealand Farmers Weekly on August the 22nd of last year. Is it actually the agenda of this government that they are prepared to see Fonterra publicly listed, they are prepared to see shares sold, they are prepared to see ownership and control go out of the hands of cooperative farmers and New Zealanders and into the hands of big foreign investors? And we're asking, as a measure of good faith, that the government support Amendment SOP number 85 that would at least put a cap on the amount of the bond fund. That is not asking too much. The response to accepting that SOP would be the support of the largest opposition party to the legislation and providing some certainty about the future of the industry. It would also be an expression of good faith by the government that it did not intend to go down that slippery slope of listing Fonterra as a public company and allowing the shares to be sold off. Because, Minister, I'm not aware whether you agree with what the Prime Minister has said, but certainly that is not the proposed agenda that you're putting forward, but the risk is there and you can settle it.
Michael Woodhouse.
I move that the question be now put.
The question is that the question be now